John Carmack once said of video games, "Story in a game is like story in a porn movie. It's expected to be there, but it's not important." He would later comment on this quote on Twitter, saying of it, "There are undeniably lots of games where the story is the entire point, and they can be done well. I do still hold that the most important games have been all about the play and not the story." Even if you don't know the name John Carmack, you know his work. If you've played a 3D game, especially a first-person game in the last 30 years, chances are some of John Carmack's code is in the engine somewhere. Games like Doom, Half-Life, and Call of Duty run on modified and derivative versions of his technology. Even if he were to never touch a computer for the rest of his life, John Carmack would have a legacy that surpasses many in the gaming industry, and 100 years from now, despite not knowing his name, his legacy will live on. Final Fantasy XIV is a complicated relationship with its own story, and once it's a Final Fantasy game, a series known among games for a rich narrative experience, and it is an MMO, a style of game which is known for simulating a complex world of interlocking player-driven systems. These styles of game are not fundamentally incompatible, but the majority of the average player's time playing Final Fantasy XIV is spent outside of the story content. Terabytes of information has already been typed, recorded, edited, and posted about the story of Dawntrail. It feels in tension, wrestling with the question of the legacy of its franchise, the legacy of its narrative, and the legacy of the game itself. Game director Naoki Yoshida has made it clear that he is constantly looking towards the future of the game. He talks often about how he wants to plan now and understand how the game will look 10 or more years into the future. This is his life's work. I was in the audience at PAX East when he showed off the player numbers since 1.0, and the room was full of love and passion for the game that has touched the hearts of so many. When I was playing Dawntrail, hearing Galul Jaja talk about his legacy and the future of his people and his country, I couldn't help but think of Yoshi P, looking out on the sea of fans energized by him and his team. Sometimes I wonder what John Carmack thinks of Doom Eternal. If you asked Final Fantasy XIV's 30 million players each individually why they play the game, you'd get 40 million different answers. Casual combat content, extreme trials, savage raids, parts parties, ultimate content, deep dungeons, crafting, gathering, in-game economy, achievement hunting, collectathons, job leveling, housing, role-playing, exploratory zone, story content, blue mage, all valid reasons to play the game. The breadth and depth of the content the game has to offer is astounding. The game encourages you to come back on and off over the course of a long period of time, and when you do come back, you'll be able to continue the 7-year-long Leave Quest grind. So the story is actually a lot more like the developers making a sequel to Final Fantasy XIV and also gluing a bunch of MMO elements on top of it. This poses a problem. You're effectively making two games, one that a portion of the player base is going to skip entirely to be done within a matter of days to get to the things that matter to them, and a portion of the player base that is going to get invested in the story no matter what. And making a sequel to Final Fantasy XIV is a lot like making a sequel to any other Final Fantasy game. There's going to be characters who are beloved that show up for fan service, new characters will be introduced, a new world-ending threat, somebody's going to look at the camera and say, "This looks like a job for the Scions of the Seventh Dawn." But this is unsustainable. Unlike any long-running franchise, there are endless arguments over when and if Final Fantasy XIV's story fell off. Some would say Heavensward was the last good expansion, staying with Stormblood all the way up to now. People are calling Dawntrail a boring expansion. One thing I haven't seen at all so far is people complaining about the actual gameplay. It appears engagement and difficulty in the combat has increased across the board. From my perspective, I've cleared both the extreme trials multiple times, cleared the normal raid tier weekly since it dropped, and I'm currently working on the Savage tier and Party Finder with some friends. I don't think I've ever been more excited to sit down and do content in this game. Part of that is definitely recency bias. This is my first expansion launch, and I fell into a group that really enjoys pushing ourselves to the highest tier of content. I've also just been playing the game a lot more. I used to consume games fairly quickly, getting through the story and moving on, but with Dawntrail, once the story is over, the game has actually begun, because the game is so much more than just the story quests and the cutscenes. But that's how the game feels like it's designed. It's designed so that you play through the sequel to Final Fantasy XIV, and all of that is an excuse to put in a bunch of zones for hunts and crafting, and dungeons and raids for the content people, glamour and housing items for the spicy people. How much time do people actually spend on the story relative to the rest of the content? This is why it's really hard to talk about the themes of Dawntrail, because it definitely has themes. I can try to make sense of Zoralja's motivation of growing up during a time of unprecedented peace and deciding that going to war and keeping that grudge after 30 years stuck in a reflection. I can try to make sense of the parallel between the Yokoi's beliefs about death versus the Endless living in Solution 9, how the game treats memory of what came before. I really like the fact that it makes you question what it even means to be alive. Is the Otis we met as a robot the same Otis we met as an endless and living memory? Is Kakiwa actually Erenville's mom or just an echo? Is the Sphene we met actually the real Sphene or just a rogue AI trained on her memories instructed to keep her people safe even at the cost of absorbing the aether of all the reflections? But can the story actually say anything? It's another Final Fantasy game about using the power of friendship to kill God. It's a good story, and I enjoyed my time playing through it, and it evoked the emotions in all the right places, but can a game like this ever actually say anything? Does the story of Dawntrail have feelings about itself? Does it try to communicate a worldview, or is it yours just filler entertainment? Dawntrail feels like the purest form of a transition piece, presenting half as a story that wants to be about unity, passing the torch to a brighter future ahead, and an existential story about characters being unable or unwilling to escape the past. I even feel torn talking about it. The story doesn't matter. It really doesn't. Someone can go the entire game skipping the cutscenes and ignoring the story content just so they can play the game, and that's a valid way to experience Final Fantasy XIV, but I still find myself tearing up towards the end of that final Dawntrail trial. That fight in the Matrix against the Queen Eternal, the rogue AI hell-bent on absorbing all the Aether across the reflections, is emotionally satisfying. Lamont going from a protagonist who was all talk and no follow-through to someone who could rule a country on as shaky ground as Tuliolol, choosing Kolina to rule with her, learning from Zeralja and Sphene. But at the same time, who the fuck cares about Lamont? We're here for the Savage Raids, the Ultimate Raids, the Extreme Trials, the Crafting and Gathering, the Daily Dungeons, the endless stream of live service content that we pay our $15 a month subscription to be able to enjoy. See that John Carmack quote from the beginning? Who cares? Why are we on Reddit throwing transphobic comments at a voice actor? Why am I on YouTube making this video? I mean, I know why I'm making this video, because I had an idea that titling a video Dawntrail story discussion and then opening up with that John Carmack quote would be really funny and generate a bunch of comments for the algorithm. Thanks guys, by the way. Comment down below again if you got this far but chose to comment right when the video started. When I experience a story, I want it to challenge me. I want to learn something about myself and my own humanity. We as a species evolved to tell stories because stories communicate ideas and feelings, and I'm annoyed that Dawntrail seems to be a backslide. It tries so hard. I've been thinking about it since finishing the last cutscene, but I haven't felt the same impact or learned the same inner truths from Dawntrail that I did after playing Shadowbringers or Endwalker. It feels hollow. It feels like all spectacle over substance. But is that a problem? I've been a lot more eager to log on since Dawntrail released. I got through the story of Dawntrail quicker than I did Shadowbringers or Endwalker. I spent more time in Dawntrail zones experiencing the content. How can the story in an MMO be important if it comes with the baggage of needing to have an MMO attached to it? I feel like I end all of my videos abruptly after dropping something that's meant to sound profound. Well, no reason to stop now.